welcome to the India Development Debate. I'm Tamanna Inamdar and we have a power-packed show for you this evening. Well, first up, we're going to be talking about the big GST meet tomorrow and the stage set for fireworks with state ministers, finance ministers of opposition states already wondering whether they will be asked to give up their legitimate due in the meeting. Remember, the GST meeting is being convened to figure out a way to reduce the yawning gap between what centre owes the states and the shortfall in revenues. More on that up ahead, but let's also tell you the other big story that we're tackling on the show is the mega debate over the NEET and JEE examinations. Should examinations be held from 1st September onwards as is being proposed, even in the face of mounting protests, not just from activists of every hue but also from various states that say they're unable to actually facilitate the conduct of these exams? We're going to break down both sides of the argument for and against for you ahead on the show. And in the big voice of the day, you are going to be hearing from Royal Enfield boss Vinod Dasari on the India Revival mission. But let me get straight to the big story. It seems like it's going to be quite a tough task to come to a consensus, which has been a hallmark of the GST Council meetings so far, at least tomorrow. At stake is the question of compensation that the centre has to pay to states as per the GST Act, taking into an account an increase in annual revenue of 14%. Now, obviously, this has been tough considering as it is the economy is in a slowdown, then the coronavirus pandemic has hit, and now the centre is reportedly looking at legal options out of the obligation they have. Before we go any further, let me go across to my colleague Ruchi Bhatia on the latest happening this evening. Ruchi, it seems there will be fireworks tomorrow with the finance ministers of Kerala and West Bengal airing their concerns very openly just 24 hours before the meet.
Oh, absolutely, Tamanna. The battle lines are drawn ahead of the next GST Council meeting, and it all started when Congress President Sonia Gandhi did a meeting with Uddhav Thackeray, Mamata Banerjee, Hemant Soren, Bhupesh Baghel. All were present in this meeting and airing a one-point agenda, a single concern on the GST dues that the centre owes to them. Having said that, after that, we did see the Kerala Finance Minister tweeting, as well as the West Bengal Finance Minister penning a letter to Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman saying that the worst fears of the state have come true. The fact that the centre owed and promised a compensation of 14% when the goods and services tax was put in place, but now it is being put on the states, because remember, the AG had opined that the GST Council has to decide a way forward. They have to make good on the compensation cess shortfall, and even though there are options such as market borrowing, remember the GST Council as a body itself cannot borrow. Either the centre or the state have to borrow, and the centres are not, and the states, remember, are not willing to pick up the tab this time around, because they feel that at a time like this, when COVID-19 has hit the states' revenues pretty hard, this is only going to increase their own debt servicing obligation. This is in fact going to lead to a cut in their expenditure, and which is why the states are not willing to pick up the tab. So what are the other options in front of the centre? One, of course, is whether they can increase the cess on other sin items. The third option on the table is whether they should increase the basket of goods that currently attract the cess, which of course could be counterproductive. The fourth option is there are a lot of cesses that the central government currently collects, but they are not devolved as a part of the goods and services tax. Perhaps there could be a possibility that some of it can be moved under GST. So various options are on the table, but the battle lines are surely drawn.
Well, thank you for that, Ruchi. You know, it brings to mind a very key question that while the markets have been celebrating today about a statement from Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman saying that she sees merit in the argument that the GST rate on two-wheelers should be brought down, where is the room for it when centre and state are fighting over the basic compensation that has to be made? Clearly, there is no mood to cut taxes. In fact, they might want to increase cesses in this current situation. To get more perspective on that, I'm joined now by Sachin Menon, Head of Indirect Tax, KPMG, and Madan Sabnavis, Chief Economist at Care Rating. Welcome to both of you and thank you for speaking with us today. Mr. Menon, let me get your take first. I want to ask you specifically on where the money is going to come from. Clearly, the GST Council by itself cannot borrow because, what are they going to borrow against? One proposal that has come forth from Kerala actually is that let us borrow against future earnings and increase the period that the centre has to pay the state's compensation cess from 5 years as per the Act to 7 years. Do you think that's the most feasible option right now?
Well, I think to begin with, the GST Act, Compensation to States Act, which provides for 14% year-over-year growth itself is a misnomer, because it was never been in the history of India we had a 14% year-over-year growth for 5 years. So it is actually an incentive given for the states to agree to introduce GST. So, and that point in time, whatever may be the logic behind it, it has been accepted. Now, I think till 1920 financial year, whatever may be the dues with respect to the compensation cess is already paid out, though it is delayed. So the issue now is what happened to the FY21 first quarter payment, which is due. And we are falling short of, I think, approximately 12,000 crores or something to make the payment to the state as per the agreement. So the option about, there are various options which has been talked about, whether we can increase the cess on some of the product or increase the products which will be subject to cess. And very clearly, this is not the right time for doing that. And if it was a prosperous period, then there is no need to do that. So that option by itself may be ill-timed if at all exercised. Then coming to GST Council borrowing, if that's the case, tomorrow Election Commission also start borrowing. It's also a constitutional authority. So that argument, I don't think it is practical. Now, coming to the last option could be either the state borrow or the central government borrow. And the states, why should they borrow? Because they are supposed to receive the money from somebody. Instead of that, why should they incur liability? So there is a thought which is in the state's mind.
Right.
Now, the remaining option is that the consolidated fund. But if it is a cess which is collected through other cess acts, as far as I know, the constitution or the law doesn't permit that to be diverted. If a cess is levied for a particular purpose, that has to be used for that purpose only. So that option perhaps may not be practical from that.
Exactly.
So then the question is that whether we can do...
Let me just get a quick word in from... yes. Allow me please to get in a quick word from Mr. Sabnavis as well on this. The question about 14%, and Mr. Menon alluded to that as well. Which state grows at 14%? Well, it's difficult to go back now and say that that's an unreasonable figure, isn't it, Mr. Sabnavis? Because that was the very basis of this agreement.
Yeah, I think that's the problem we have whenever we put down things in print and make that constitutional. So I think this number of 14%, as Sachin has rightly said, was more a kind of an incentive to ensure that all the states which were in the opposition did fall in line and agree to it. It's analogous to what we have in the MPC, where we are targeting a rather unreasonable inflation rate of 4%, and then we run into all kinds of problems. So I think that 14% is definitely the starting point. But I think there is an easy solution to this, I think, which is the government is not willing to do, and that is to pay the states and you borrow more, because the states have constraints when it comes to borrowing, but the center does not. And you just need to make sure that the boat continues sailing, in which case the center will have to do the borrowing. The GST Council does not have to do it. And as Sachin has said, that the states should not be doing it because they are supposed to be receiving it from the center. So what the center can do is that if you cannot increase the rates today, because if you increase the rates, consumption may fall, collections may fall further. Therefore, the only thing is that you start borrowing more in the market. So I think that's the thing which the central government has to do. And so far, I think there's been reluctant to do anything on the fiscal side, anything which makes sure that the fiscal deficit goes up.
Yeah, so that seems like unavoidable right now. The center will have to borrow. I have hardly any time left in this conversation, but before I go, Mr. Menon, a very, very short take from you. In the middle of all of this, this optimism that, GST rates on two-wheelers or on any other item will be cut, do you think that that's a bit misplaced?
No, I'm not very sure about by cutting that the two-wheelers rate, how much is the revenue loss. Many cases, maybe high-profile item which doesn't contribute much to the kitty is being done as a optical kind of measure. But I don't think that at this point in time we are talking about increasing the compensation cess rate or including more items under the compensation cess. We are talking about cutting the rate seems to be not practical. And end of the day, the Kerala government suggestion of increasing that to 7 years or 8 years or whatever it is, or 10 years, that require an amendment of the act, first of all, to be endorsed by the parliament. So I don't think it's an easy option. I think the only thing is that center can borrow. There is no doubt about it. Whether it is through bond or some other means, they can do that. So I'm not seeing any other way out.
That the center will have to come forth and borrow. Yes, let's see if that's the conclusion that is reached after tomorrow's meeting. Remember, we'll be keeping an eye on it. Do come back tomorrow on the India Development Debate to find out what happened. Thank you so much to both of you for joining us on the first conversation.